Hi, I'm Dan, and today I'm giving you my very first reaction / review of Cloak and Dagger Season 2, Episode 3, Chateau Selves. So this is really sort of Mayhem's coming out story. It's all about what she's been up to basically since she was born, and we get sort of the backstory of how she was separated from the regular Bridget. And, well, I guess there is no real regular Bridget, because the idea is that it's like the docile one and the dominant one. And so it's an interesting take on, like, not like light and dark, but kind of light and dark emotions. One is like very filled with anger and mayhem, and one is very like she just can't even fire her gun. She's just very ineffectual. It's an interesting take. I certainly thought that we were going for the normal thing of like you take a likable character and then they have an experiment or whatever happened to them, like Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, where it's like, oh, and now there's some pain here because they're evil, but there's still someone you know behind it all, and can they be saved? And we sort of got that, and we even have like the split personality thing maybe happening in the premiere, but instead now we have these two separate entities. On the one hand, I'm like, that's cool because it feels different and like I was unexpected, and it adds layers to what's going on here. On the flip side, I'm also kind of like, this is odd because I don't feel like I need the docile Bridget, and I'm like, I kind of feel like the mice do, and I'm like, yeah, one of them should probably kill the other one because I don't need both of these characters, because the docile one is so ineffectual, and the dominant mayhem one, while violent, is far more interesting, and even has some interesting emotional complexity with the fact that she doesn't know what to do with herself. She feels like she doesn't have a soul. The whole talk with the priest thing I thought was very interesting, and how he sort of directed her towards like a Punisher way of doing things, where it's like, well, if all you want to do is, destroy, better destroy the people who deserve it. And I thought that made a lot of sense. So I'm definitely on board with that version. Do I feel like we need another Bridget? I'm not so sure. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, is the ultimate idea here is that because we still have the other one, we can somehow bring them back together, and then that will be the way you solve the problem? I don't know. But it's certainly a different way of taking things. And I did like how they were able to use the docile Bridget, because she still thinks like the other Bridget, to sort of figure out where she would go and how to thwart mayhem. And I think the thing that really worked well about this episode was how Tandy and Tyrone interacted on like a philosophical level with the idea of mayhem. That we have Tyrone being like, oh god, is that me? And like his fear of like becoming that. But, Tandy very nicely being like, you're a protector, which we saw very interestingly in the end there. But then on the flip side, we have Tandy who's like, maybe I should be like that. And it's always been very interesting about like Tandy, while representing like the angelic, pure light hope thing, she is actually the one who has a little bit more darkness to her, and that she has her hopes of potentially maybe I should be like mayhem, whereas Tyrone is more centered, even though he is like this dark demonic being. I thought that was very interesting, again, how they played that off of each other, and how Tyrone bringing up his brother I thought was a really good way of showing Tandy why he felt so strongly against what Mayhem was doing. So I thought all that worked really well, and I think that the way the episode ended with Tyrone taking Mayhem into the cosmic cloak thingy, which I don't know anything about because I haven't read the comics, was very interesting, and I'm excited to see what happens there, because I'm pretty sure all we really know from the show is that he brought Connors in there, so that would be a way we wrap that up, which I didn't expect to see anything about that this soon, and I'm excited to see where they go with it. And I think that they do a very good job with these dream sequence episodes, and then seeing the promo for next week of Tandy going in there, thought it was very interesting, so I'm excited to see where they take that. I also like that they're delving into the stuff with the human trafficking, although at the same time, to a certain degree, I feel like this is sort of a PG-13 take on something that is very dark. And it's not to say that like we need to see the darkness, and like I feel like this show's subject matter and the idea of Mayhem as a violent character and all that stuff, I can't help but be like, well, what would this show be like if it was on Netflix and it was able to be the R-rated show that I feel like the comics want this show to be? But I do applaud them for trying to take on this sort of serious subject matter. It's not necessarily that I feel like we need to see darker things actually happening. I don't know. It just feels like, oh man, this is like super heavy stuff, but not necessarily going to be treated with as much reality or necessarily as it would be on something like a Daredevil or a Punisher. And that also goes beyond the subject matter as far as seeing the violence that Mayhem is creating. It's pretty toned down. It's not that violent. And I feel like seeing her go through and killing the gang members and everything, it's not that impressive. It's not as impressive as I want it to be. And in general, I feel like this was a very action-heavy episode, and it highlighted that the action on the show still has a long way to go. I feel like the budget is just not really there on a choreography level, on a stunt level, even if they do a pretty good job with the special effects, but they don't have that sort of flow of the fight sequences, and even things like Tandy throwing the knife and Mayhem catching it, I feel like should have been like a really cool moment. Instead it felt kind of flat because I didn't like believe it really. So, you know, these are things that I feel like that they need to work on, that I hope that we can have better moments in, but it's also something to a certain degree you have to accept. I mean, it reminds me of Runaways, where it's like, yeah, the action's never going to be necessarily the highlight of the series, but that is tough because they are superheroes, and the super part of the superheroes is important. That said, still great character moments. Love Tandy and Tyrone working together. Mayhem is really interesting as a villain for the season that's, you know, an anti-hero of sorts. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like the show is held back at all by the action, by the budget, things like that? Or do you really like where they're going with this show? I'm excited to see what happens next. In the meantime, check out my other content. I've been following Chilling Adventures of Sabrina all week long, putting out reviews of the various episodes. I also covered In the Dark, a new CW show last week, so check those out. And of course, check out my previous Cloak and Dagger content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you're doing okay.